Alright guys, welcome back to Formula 1 news. Another day, another controversy between the drivers and race direction. Max Verstappen especially not at all happy with what he has dubbed stubborn stewarding by the stewards themselves at the Austrian Grand Prix with regard to track limits. Christian Horner reckons he may well get even worse come to the French Grand Prix at Paul Ricard. Very much intrigued to your thoughts in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you are new as always, I would greatly appreciate it. Smashed through 4,000 subscribers as well yesterday. Really appreciate it. Let's keep on going. Firstly, let's talk the driver lineup for 2023. Interesting rumours going around right now as to what Fernando Alonso's future might be, because despite the fact that he's probably been driving the best out of the two Alpine drivers, Ocon is signed for next year, Alonso is not. Now they have Oscar Piastri sitting there waiting for a seat, the reigning Formula 2 champion. They want to give him a seat really, they don't want to lose him elsewhere, because if they try and loan him out to Williams or something, as has been rumoured, he might not ever return to that team, or they might not be able to come up with an appropriate relationship, or Williams themselves might want to bring in a guy like Logan Sargent from their kind of Formula 2 campaigns, rather than fielding a driver that's then going to go back to Alpine. So the rumours kind of had it as to whether they might take the very bold decision, considering the fact that how Alonso has been driving this season, to effectively get rid of him in favour of Piastri anyway, despite the fact that he's outqualified Ocon quite significantly so far this season, but doesn't quite have the race results to back it up because, well, unfortunate circumstances all across the board. And it seems like they're kind of playing hardball with these comments here from Otmar, saying that he wasn't even in the team when they signed Fernando, like that, saying that Piastri is ready to go. We haven't made our decision yet on the second driver alongside Ocon, but saying that Piastri is ready for the opportunity. So it is a rather interesting situation there, because if Alonso isn't in the Alpine seat next year, he wants to be. He also has made it very clear that he doesn't feel like he is blocking younger drivers because he's still at the top of his game weight. It doesn't feel like he's blocking anyone because, as he goes on to describe right here, like, I see it differently. Motor racing is all about the stopwatch. The key question is, are you still fast enough and do you live up to it? If you are slow and perform poorly, then you are blocking the way for up-and-coming talent, then you have to make way. I am still fast. It is other drivers who are blocking the door for fresh blood. So I think a fair point from Alonso. He's driving very well indeed this season, but of course Alpine probably see it as, well, you know, we want to get Piastri in our team. What's going to happen to Alonso? We also saw the fact that Alpine committed to hiring, like, I think 75, maybe it was 150 more staff for future seasons to try and compete with the top dogs. They right now have the fourth fastest car. That puts them in the position to potentially compete for podiums on certain weekends if crazy stuff happens. So like that, I'm sure is pretty much where Alonso wants to be, given the opportunities that aren't really going to exist at the upper echelon of teams right now. So that's where he wants to say. Whether Alpine wants him, who knows? Because if he does have to leave Alpine and they choose Piastri over him, what seat even is there for Alonso that can actually be competitive? Maybe the McLaren seat, even though that would be a kind of crazy timeline if that was to occur, but something to keep your eyes on, no doubt. Now, Alpha Tauri as well, Yuki Tsunoda, there has been some questions, especially because of some recent crashes, like the Silverstone spin took out Gasly. That wasn't ideal, but it does seem like kind of a Franz Tost from the Alpha Tauri side, and also Helmut Marko do think quite highly of Tsunoda and his potential. So right now he is still on course to keep that seat for 2023, but it is still far from guaranteed. Gasly's going to be there, we know that for a fact. Where he goes after next season, bit of a question mark, because of course Alpha Tauri, the car, has taken a significant step back this season compared to the last. Let's talk about officiating so far this year, because definitely has been a question of consistency, not just in terms of racing decisions, as in when Verstappen was pushing Schumacher off the track back at Silverstone, that was okay. So was it when Perez did it to Leclerc and also to Hamilton in pretty much within the space of a few corners back at Silverstone. But then in Austria, when of course Albon kind of pushes Norris off the track, then okay, he gets punished for it, 5-second penalty. Same thing down at turn 4. So kind of strange in a way. The drivers are thinking, okay, hang on a second, how come one race you can do what you want to push drivers off the track and give them no room, and then you do that the next race and now we're getting punished for it, right? Like, what exactly is going on here? And it's not just the kind of racing decisions, right, racing incidents and this type of stuff that are actually being talked about by the drivers, but mainly the track limit stuff was a key talking point of the Austrian Grand Prix, and I never really got around to talking about this in detail, but there were 43 offences of crossing the white line noted by the stewards, and this caused a lot of black and white flags for drivers to get ready to get a penalty if they did something wrong again, as a lot of them did. It got 5-second penalties as a result. Even Hamilton was like, hang on a second, now I didn't cross that white line, why are you giving me a penalty? And the thing is, there's not like a Hawkeye system in Formula 1 like there is in tennis to determine this. It's just effectively eyeballed, and if they're 1 millimeter over the white line, all the tyres are outside of the white line, they're off the track, then the lap time gets deleted, but also they get a warning for exceeding track limits. There's obviously certain corners, especially around Austria and also around France, where it's beneficial to go outside the track limits if you can, to widen the corner even further than you already can. But many drivers are saying that in certain situations, it's not giving us any actual benefit at all, and they need to be more lenient on track limits and stuff like this, which is interesting from the drivers, it must be said, because last season all this talk was about consistency, and now the FIA is saying, okay, we're going to be incredibly consistent. If you go outside the white line, you're getting punished no matter what. And other drivers are like, well, maybe there are exceptions here, which, maybe they have a point, but if they want consistent stewarding, this is probably the way it has to be done, to be honest, and probably drivers will learn to be more careful. But they have mentioned Hamilton, I think Norris especially mentioned that given the way they are in the cockpit, they really can't even see where their tyres are or where the line is. They kind of just have to guess, like based on, look how small you are in the car here, right? You could barely have any visibility out the car. It's really tough to tell where you are as a driver. So that is potentially another thing to be considered here, right? But Verstappen kind of called it a bit of a joke, a bit stupid. Some other drivers said that there was so much punishment for this going on during the race. As Verstappen says, track limits this weekend has been a joke, not only in Formula 1, but in the other kind of categories as well. If you're going at that speed, you're going to have understeer. The tyres are wearing, you can go over the white line, it can happen. Do you gain time? Sometimes yes, sometimes no, but a lot of the time Verstappen thinks it's rather irrelevant. If you go like 1 millimeter over, do you deserve a track limits violation? If you want it to be consistent, probably yes, but at the same time, even then, because it's kind of eyeballed by the stewards, it's not always consistent anyway. We saw, of course, it in the qualifying when Perez went off the track at turn 8 and they didn't call it up for some reason during qualifying 2. He would have been out P12, P13, whatever it was, got through to Q3 and then got a kind of, post-qualifying demoted back to P13, screwed over Gasly because Gasly would have been in Q3 had that not been the case, right? So for some reason, because it's done by eye, they missed that one for whatever reason, and therefore things were a bit controversial as a result of it going into the sprint race as it turned out to be on Saturday, and even during the race itself it was a big talking point also. And Verstappen feels like the race directors are rather stubborn on this issue. I guess he's thinking they're like, look, these race directors, they're not racing drivers, they don't understand what it's like to be in the car. They're saying this is the rule, this is the hard and fast rule, but there's actually more of a kind of a discussion to be had on this than maybe the race directors are presently willing to have. And as he kind of goes on to say right here, hopes they can find a more constructive way of working with the drivers. This was the rather interesting article here saying that it might not be necessary, Verstappen says, to have one race director, like as in one head guy like Massey last year. This year there's two, Freitas and Niels Vitic as well. So the question has been raised there. If there's one weekend with one of the race directors, one weekend with the other, you're going to naturally get some sort of inconsistency. But as he says here, I wish they'd work more with the drivers instead of just keeping their stance and just being stubborn on it. We want to make it better for everyone. It's not like we're fighting for ourselves. We have good conversations between the drivers, and at the end of the day, we agree on most things. Of course, everyone has their own opinions, but I think the track limits debate was a bit of a joke in all the kind of categories, as he said. Sometimes you go into a corner, some of them are a bit blind. If you have more understeer, tyres are wearing, it's easy to just go over the line. Do you gain time? Maybe you do, maybe you don't, right? And maybe it comes down to whether you gain time from it or not, but that's very difficult for the stewards to discuss. It's more easy for them just to say, okay, look, if you go outside the white line, you're getting penalised no matter what. So I kind of side with the idea of having the consistency on this. Look, I'm sure the drivers probably have a point, but if they do enforce this very heavily, as I think it's been kind of frustrating when they haven't done in previous seasons, then the drivers should over time learn to adapt to it. But Verstappen sees that as being rather stubborn, and I think other drivers are kind of torn on the issue as well. I think as Charles Leclerc kind of said, it's not a good look for the sport when all this drama is going on. I think consistency has always been a thing we've searched for. They can always do better. He reckons that probably just having one race director is the way to go. But of course, Massey's not going to come back. He left the FIA recently, but does say it will be easier to manage, right? Because that was the other part of this, that as Perez says, often it's not just the head guy that's different, but it's the entire stewarding department there. You go one weekend and there's 4 stewards or 4 head stewards or whatever that are often completely different people to what you saw last time out, with completely different ideas on whether this should be fully enforced, how lenient they're going to be in certain situations. Ideally, surely it's the same stewarding every weekend. The stewards follow around the drivers, they follow around Formula 1 race to race, and therefore they fully understand what the drivers are thinking. And also because of the fact that sometimes there'll be a penalty, let's say, that's happened in the previous race. I think even this was mentioned, one of the reasons why Vettel stormed out of the meeting that he got that €25,000 fine for was that Alonso was going on and on to the directors about it, or to the stewards, about why he got this penalty back in Canada for weaving on the straight to try and hold off Valtteri Bottas, and he was saying, I think at Silverstone, that the same exact thing happened to him. He then went to Austria and was saying that look, I should have got he should have got penalised for that, just like I did back in Canada. But then those race directors or those stewards are sitting there we weren't in Canada, we weren't in Silverstone, what do you want me to do about it, right? I don't know those incidents, I don't know what those stewards were thinking. And then of course I'm sure it's frustrating Alonso no ends, and the other drivers as well, to which point Vettel eventually walks out the meeting, gets a €25,000 fine as a result. So not a great look on the whole here for the drivers, the FIA in general, the stewarding. Entreaty or respectful on it. I honestly just prefer the consistency of if you go outside the white line, that's it. But I kind of understand the drivers driver's POV on this given the visibility and other such situations, but in the end it did seem to work out okay on the weekend, and I think in general it's just track design it does come down to, right? Because certain corners even around Austria have the situation where if you do go wide, you're in the gravel, and if that's the case, then you're going to get punished yourself for going wide rather than the race directors having to do it. Like, certain tracks are designed in such a way that, like, you know, going outside the track limits is obviously going to be beneficial. It's always going to be the case in certain situations, but I don't know, it's a bit of a grey area, I must admit. And one of those examples could well be Paul Ricard, the French Grand Prix, of course, coming up, and Christian Horner says that this issue about track limits might be even greater around Paul Ricard, because a very similar circuit where there's many corners where going like as wide as you possibly can is going to be beneficial, especially in qualifying. I'm sure there's going to be some laps deleted, and in the race as well. Like, this was really the first time this year in Austria it was a massive deal within the race itself. Might be the same thing at the French Grand Prix as well. We will just have to wait and see. Kind of interesting things to finish out the video. This is wins since the start of 2020. 37 out of the 50 races or whatever there's been have gone to either Lewis Hamilton or Max Verstappen. We've got Perez here with 3, even though one of these I'm pretty sure was with Racing Point, so maybe should have been pink or something. Leclerc only has 3, which is quite remarkable really if you think about it, since the start of 2020. Danny Rick, Sainz, Gasly, Ocon, and Bottas, of course, also getting onto this list. And just to mention this, the points difference 2022 versus 2021 after 11 rounds. It definitely is the resurgence of Ferrari power, Ferrari, Alfa, and Haas all moving up the pecking order here with Red Bull as well. Alpine pretty much neck and neck with where they were before, but McLaren the biggest losers so far, minus 90, Mercedes minus 70, Aston Martin as well, Williams all down, all the Mercedes power teams down, rather interesting, but at least their engines generally don't explode. Very much intrigued to your thoughts on all this stuff in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new as always, take care of yourselves, and I'll see you next time.